This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so let's start. So we'll start with this UI5 backend. So UI5 backend development is nothing but what? OData service development. OData service development. So as we know, this UI5 backend developer is responsible for what? Developing the what? OData service. One second, please. So UI5 backend developer is responsible for developing the OData service. So what is the job of OData service? It is what responsible for performing the CRUD operations. Okay, it is responsible for creating the record, reading the record, updating the record, and what deleting the records. So once a OData service is developed, a OData service will be associated with what? A URL. That URL will be given to what? The front-end developer. Front-end developer. Front-end developer is responsible for what? Consuming that particular OData service. Okay, either we can develop the front-end application either in the Eclipse tool or in the Web IDE tool. Either in the Eclipse tool or in the Web IDE tool. Okay. So now let us understand the process of developing what? OData service. Okay. So this is the standard process for developing the OData service. These are the steps you have to follow almost in every OData service development. Okay, what is the first step here? We need to define what entity type. Okay, what is entity we'll understand going forward. First, we need to define the entity type. Then we need to create the entity set. We need to create the entity type, and then we have to create something called as entity set. Okay, as part of this entity is like a structure. What is a structure? A structure is a collection of what? Fields. Similarly, an entity is a collection of what? Properties. Entity is a collection of what? Properties. Okay, so we need to define the properties as part of that particular entity type. Then once we define the properties, we need to generate something called as runtime artifacts. Okay, we need to generate runtime artifacts. All this together, we call it as what? Runtime artifacts. Means as part of every OData service development, okay, runtime artifacts gets generated. Runtime objects. What are those runtime artifacts here? Data provider extension class, data provider class, model provider extension class, model provider class, and then model name and what? Service name. So what is the purpose of this runtime artifacts? We'll understand in the next what 25 to what 25 days to 1 month. Okay, as part of our OData development, we will be using all these things. Then once a runtime artifacts are generated, we need to implement the business logic as part of generated stubs. As part of generated stubs. So again, what are these stubs also? We'll see today only. Then once we implement the business logic, we need to register the service with what? Gateway client. We need to register the service with the gateway client. Then we need to maintain the service to perform what? CRUD operations. So this is the overall procedure we need to follow to develop any OData service. Okay, so these are the standard steps. So the interview point of view also, we should tell these things. What is the process we follow in developing the OData service? We need to define the entity type with the entity set. as part of that entity we need to create the properties are like what, fields only. Okay, then once we define the properties inside the entity type, we need to generate what, runtime artifacts. There are some 5 to 6 runtime objects gets generated. Then once the runtime artifacts are generated, we need to implement the business logic. Okay, then once the logic is implemented, we need to register the service and then we need to maintain the service to perform what, crude operations. Okay, so let me directly get into the example so that we'll understand what is the procedure involved in developing the OData service. Okay, suppose here, let me log on to my SAP system. Just a minute, I'm connecting to the server. Yeah, so here I'll go to function builder, try to understand. I'm trying to explain the requirement. I'll go to function builder. We have some function model here, battery underscore EPM underscore product, battery underscore EPM underscore product. Let me search for that. I pressed F4. Yeah, you can see here we have some 5 function models related to this. Battery underscore EPM underscore product get list. Okay, get list. What is the purpose of this function model? It will return the list of what, products. Okay, and there is another function model get underscore detail. It will return the details of a particular product. This function model will return the details of all the products. This function model will return the details of a particular product. This function model is going to delete the product from the system. This function model is going to create a new product. This function model is used for updating the existing product details. So what is the purpose of OData service? To perform what? Crude operation. So why do we interact with the database? To perform those 4 operations: create, delete, update, and read. Create, update, delete, and what? Read. Okay. So this particular 5 function models, they are going to what? Perform the crude operations related to what? EPM product. Okay. So let me take this function model. Any function model, I am taking this one. Battery underscore EPM underscore product underscore get list. This is a function model. If I display this, yeah. What is the description here? EPM get product list. So what is the signature of this? If you got, before using any function model, what we generally do, we check the signature of the function model. We will understand the optional parameters and mandatory parameters. We will understand the data type of these parameters. We will understand whether they have any default values. So we'll understand the signature. Okay, done. This is my signature, done. What does it take? It takes some optional parameters, maximum number of lines to it, how many products you want to read, any of this is optional. What does it do? It returns, yeah, it returns some database tables. It will return some database tables. Okay, let me try to execute this here. I'll click on this execute button. I'm just trying to understand the functionality of this. Okay, so as of now, this internal table has got 0 entries. When I click on execute button, yeah, good. You can see here it is returning me one internal table. It is returning me one internal table, header data. It has got some 118 entries. If I click on this, yeah, it is showing me the what? The list of what? Products. Okay, this function model, battery underscore EPM underscore product underscore get list. It is returning me the list of what? Product details. It is returning me how many entries? 118 entries. So my requirement now is The requirement is something like this here. Yes, here. So here I'm taking two cases, front-end development as well as back-end development. So let us focus on this back-end development first. Okay. So in this back-end development, what I have to do, I need to develop the OData service. What this OData service has to do, it has to call that particular BAPI function model. What is that BAPI function model? BAPI underscore EPM underscore product underscore get list. What that function model is going to do, it is going to return me the internal table containing the list of what products, containing the list of product details. Okay, whatever the product details it is returning. Okay, this is my backend development. So once the OData is generated, URL will be generated. That URL will give it to what front end developer. The front end developer will develop that front end application either in Eclipse tool or in what Web ID tool. So what are the product details I'm returning here? Those product details I have to consume in my front-end application. Just like you assume this is similar to a table control. When do we go for table control? When you want to display multiple records in the form of rows and columns, we'll go for table control. So assume that here also the front-end developer is going to develop a application where we have to what show a table and a button. Whenever I click on this button, what should happen? We have to invoke the OData service. What this OData service will do internally, it will call the BAPI function model, which is returning the list of product details. That list of product details I am displaying in my front end application. So here we'll focus only on the back end part now. Okay, in this back end part, what I have to do now, I have to load the OData service what which has to call that particular BAPI function model and return the what product details. So my job is now is what I'm thinking myself as only what backend developer. So my job is I need to develop the OData service and I need to test the OData service. Okay, before giving that OData service to the front end developer, we need to test that particular OData service from my side only. I need to check whether all the operations are working or not. All the operations is all the database operations, reading multiple records, reading single record, deleting the record, modifying the record, inserting the new record. I need to check all the database operations. If you feel that everything is working fine, then we'll prepare the technical specs which contains the information related to that particular OData service. And that OData service will be consumed in the front-end application by the UI5 front-end application developer. Right? So this is my requirement now. I need to develop the OData service. So in the SAP system, where do we develop this OData services by using what? NetWeaver Gateway Service Builder, just like we have class builder SC24, we have function builder SC37. We use what? NetWeaver Gateway Service Builder. So what is the T code for that? SCGW. So I'm in my SAP system here. हाँ देवशीष बोलो.
सर व्हाट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ द ईडीएम ईडीएम क्या है
वो बाद में entity data model. Entity data model. Okay, the front end developer has to consume that particular OData service na. So we'll expose that OData service in the form of EDM. Okay, so here let us not focus on this part. Here our focus initially is what? To develop the OData service so that I should be able to perform all the crude operations and I need to test it. If it is working fine, then we'll think of exposing it. EDM means as of now entity data model. Okay, entity data model. Right, so what is the tool we use for developing this? NetWeaver Gateway Service Builder. NetWeaver Gateway Service Builder. What is the T code? SCGW. So if I go to this SCGW, it will open me what? NetWeaver Gateway Service Builder. So this is a tool we use for developing what? OData service. Am I clear? So this is my EHP7. In my EHP7, I'm trying to develop the OData service. So in this SCGW, what you have to do initially is first we need to create a project. Okay, these are all the existing projects. So on my application toolbar, we have a button called create project. I'll just click on this button. Okay, I'll click on this button. It is asking the project name. Okay, you can give any project name. Okay, let me give the project name as something ZEPM, some project name. Okay, I'll give the description. Crude operations on EPM product. So provide some description, and this is the project name. Since it is a custom project starting with Z, right? And last in the package, I can save it in a transportable package, or I can save it in what, local object. So don't worry about other attributes here. Just click on what, local object. So the project gets what, created. Yeah, you can see it. This is my project name. What is the project name? ZEPM. So under this project, you can see we have some nodes here. We have data model, we have service implementation, we'll have runtime artifacts, and we have what, service maintenance. So by the end of the session, we'll understand all these things. Okay, so this is my project. Under this project, okay, under data model, we have something called as entity type, we have associations, and we have something called as entity set. For the time being, compulsory, we need to create the project. Under the project only, we have to create the entities, all those things. Okay, so without project, there is no entity. So compulsory, we have to create the project. Done. So under this project, under the data model, we have entity type, we have associations, and what, entity set. So what is this entity type is? You assume entity type is like a structure. Entity type is a structure which is a collection of what, fields. It's a collection of what, fields. Entity set is like a internal table. Understand like that. Entity type is a work area. Entity set is like a internal table. And there is something called as association. Again, this will come later on. Association means to link two entities, we use what, associations. Assume that one entity is dealing with sales order header data. Another entity is dealing with sales order item data. I need to link both those entities. So we'll go for what, association. At this stage, just ignore it. We are not concerned about that. So what is the procedure we have to follow? First, what is that I gave here? Yeah, we need to create first what, entity type. So we have to decide. We have to decide what is the entity type you have to create and what are the properties you want to create. Okay. So my requirement is what is the function model I want to consume, what is the function model I want to access, battery underscore EPM underscore what, product underscore get underscore what, list. We just now understood the functionality of this. It is returning the list of what, product details. Okay. One of the internal is returning what, header data, which is of type so and so. It is optional parameter. This is the internal table which is carrying the product details. If I double click on this structure has got how many fields? This structure has got some 18 fields. So each product has got what, 18 fields it seems, like product underscore ID, type underscore code, okay, category, name, description, like this. So my requirement is I'm not interested in all these 18 fields. I'm interested only to what, read the product ID, name of the product, and the description of the product. So if you see the requirement here, in my front-end application, in my table, I have to show how many columns? Only 3 columns: product ID, name, and what? Description. So since I have to show only these 3 columns to my user, what I'll do, I'll create the entity with only what, 3 properties. I'll create an entity with only 3 properties. So the developer has to decide what properties you have to give, what are the names of the properties, what are the data type of the properties, everything we need to decide. So product ID should refer to this field. Now. What is the data type of this? Character of 10 it seems. Name is what here? Character of 255. Description is what here? Character of what? 255. So what are the 3 fields I want to consume? All are what? Character only. Keep that point in mind. So what is the first step I need to do? I need to define the entity type with the required properties. Whenever we create the entity type, automatically entity set gets created. So what is entity set? We'll understand now. Yeah. So as part of a project, this is my data model. There are many ways to create the entity type. There are many ways to create the entity type. Now this is our starting example. So let me try to create the entity type. How do you create? Under data model, as part of entity type, right click on this, right click on the entity type and say what? Create. As I told you, there are many ways to create the entity. Okay, we'll discuss that many ways going forward. So I can import it from a structure, I can import it from a function model, I can import it from a search help, I can import it from file, whatever it is. So we don't know about these options at this stage. At this stage, I'm trying to create the entity manually. Manually means what? I'll create the entity, I'll create the properties under the entity one by one. So right click on the entity type, say create. Create. Let me provide some entity type name. Okay, I'll give the entity type name as, since it deals with products, I'll give a meaningful entity name. I can give any name. I can give any name. Okay, assume that I want to read the sales orders data. So I'll give a meaningful entity name like what? Sales order. I want to read the purchase order data. So I'll give what? Purchase order. I want to read the invoice data. So I'll give invoice. So meaningful name. I want to read customer data. So I'll give customer. So here it deals with the product. So I'm giving a meaningful entity name. Let me get as product. While creating the entity type only, I'll create the entity set. So what I'll do, I'll select the checkbox what? Create the related entities. What it is saying is optional. Optional means I can simply create the entity type and I have to create the entity set separately. Instead of creating it separately, while creating the entity type only, I am trying to create the entity set. When I select the checkbox, SAP itself will propose a name for what? Entity set. Let us see what is the name it proposes. I'll just select the checkbox, create the rate entity set. It is enabled. What is the name it is proposing? Product set. If you want, you can change the name. If you want, you can change the name, but I don't want to disturb the naming conventions followed by what? SAP. What is the naming convention it is following here for entity set? Entity type name suffixed with what keyword? Set. Suffix the keyword set. So this is my entity set name. So continue. Done. So what happened here? See, the entity type is created. The entity type is created. If I expand this entity type, it has got something called as properties and something called as navigation properties. So what is the next step here? Define the properties as part of what? Entity type. Define the properties as part of entity type. So what I'll do, if I double under entity, if I double click on the properties, as of now, there are no properties in my entity. So I need to define the properties. So the developer has to decide what properties you have to design. I can give any name for the properties, but since I want to refer to that function model, in that function model parameter, what are the fields of that product underscore ID, name and what? Description. Okay, so here also, let me give some meaningful names. So I'll double click on the properties. How many properties I want to create? Three properties. So I can just click on what? Append row, or I can click on what? Insert row. Let me click on append row. I'm appending some three rows. Done. I'll give the name of the property. You can give any name. Let me give the name as the product ID. I'll give the name as product ID. Then it is asking the data type, EDM type. EDM type means entity data model type. Entity data model data type. So in my function model, all those three fields are what type? Character. Na? So I'll just browse this. Okay, I have to choose the appropriate data type. So I'll go for what? EDM dot what? String. EDM dot string. What is it? Fixed or what? Variable length character data. So I'll go for EDM dot string. Done. Then I'll give the other field here. Let me give name. You can give any names. I can give the names as P1, P2, P3, but I'm giving a meaningful property names. Name also. Don't worry about the other columns. You will understand all these things in the next 1 month or so. I'll just choose the idiom type again as what? String only, because all are characters. Done. I'll give another property name. Let me give it as what description. Description. Done. I'll give the data type as what EDM version. So what I've done so far, I just created the entity type with what three properties. With three properties. Done. Let me check whether I'm having any syntax errors. I'll save it. Check for the syntax error. Ah, good. I'm getting an error. What is that? Project EPM has been checked. Errors were found. Data model consistency. Entity type product must define at least one key property. Just like in our ABAP tables, every table should have minimum what? One primary key. So here also it is asking us to give what? One key property. So what I'll do wantedly, I'll select the second property as key property. What is that name? Let me check what happens. So I'm just selecting it as a key property. Done. Let me check for the syntax error. I'm doing the syntax check. I don't have any error. So you can see what is the key property and name. If you take our ABAP tables concept, the key fields must be at the beginning. But here it need not be at the beginning. Understood? So wantedly I made the second property as key property. It is not giving any, but the general recommendation is it always makes sense to define the key properties at the beginning. So what I'll do, I'll make product ID as what? Key property. I'll make the product ID as what? Key property. So I'll just select this. Done. I can have any number of key properties. As of now, I'm creating the entity with only one key property. Done. Let me save it. Check for the syntax error. Done. So I created the entity successfully with how many properties? Three properties. We have done up to these three steps. We have created the entity, we have created the entity set, and we have created the entity with how many properties? Three properties. So if you see here, this is my entity type product. That product has got what? How many properties? Three properties. If I go to the entity set, this is my entity set. If I expand this, this is my entity set name. What is the product set? Done. Let me come to service implementation. If I expand the service implementation, what is my entity set name? Product product set. If I expand this, good. You can see here, it has created some five stubs. It has created some five stubs. Okay, so what you have to understand is every entity set will be associated with what? Five stubs. We call them as what? Stubs. What are the stubs here? The names are always same. Every entity set will always have these five steps. Create step, which is responsible for creating the record, delete for deleting the record, get entity for reading single record, get entity set for reading multiple records, update is for modifying the existing record. So I repeat once again, whenever we create the entity, we need to create the entity set. As part of the entity, we need to define the properties with at least what? One key property. Then as part of entity set, some five stubs gets generated. These are called as stubs, stubs. Okay, what is the purpose of the stubs? We'll understand. So five stubs got created, done. So data model is done, service implementation is done. Then we have runtime artifacts. As of now, you can see there is no node created. It is blank. Runtime artifact means there are no runtime artifacts at this stage. So what I have to do now? I need to generate the runtime objects. I need to generate the runtime artifacts. What is the next step here? Generate the runtime artifact. So what I'll do here? I'll choose my entity on the application toolbar. There is a button what? Generate runtime objects. Generate runtime objects. I'll click on that. So when I click on the generate runtime objects, when I click on this, done. All this together, we call it as what? Runtime artifacts, runtime objects. What is a model provider extension class, model provider class, data provider extension class, data provider class, model name, service name. This is my service name. Okay, so what is the purpose of this model provider class? data product class. Again, we'll understand in the next 3-4 sessions. Just ignore it. As of now, these are the runtime artifacts which got generated based on my project name. What is my project name I give? ZEPM. Yeah, ZEPM is my project name. So based on that project name only, you can observe it has proposed my DPC classes, DPC extension class, MPC class, and NPC extension class. Okay, so as of now, we will not get into these runtime artifacts. I'll just click on continue. I will save it in the local object. Right, so runtime objects got generated. What is the purpose of these objects? Again, it requires some 4 to 5 days to understand. Just ignore it. I can see runtime objects for the project so and so successful. They are the runtime objects. So just ignore these objects at this stage. Now you can see under this runtime artifacts, I can see all those runtime objects. If I expand this, okay, so this is my runtime objects. Done. So if I double click on this, it is a data product class, data product extension class. I can open these classes in my class builder. Okay, so as of now, I don't want to write the code manually. I don't want to write the code manually. That is the reason I'm not discussing much on this. Just ignore it. Right. So runtime objects got generated. What is the next step here? Implement the business logic as part of what? Generated stubs under what entity set? Implement the business logic as part of generated stubs under what? Under what? Entity set. So let me go back to my service implementation. So how do we implement here? Under service implementation, we will have the entity set, and just now we understood that every entity set will be associated with what? 5 stubs. Okay. So which stub I want to implement now? What is my requirement? I have to read the list of what? I have to read the list of what? Product details. I have to read the list of what? Product details. Am I clear? So since I have to read the multiple records, so related to read operation, what are the steps you have to use? Get entity and get entity set. Get entity is for reading single record. Get entity set is for reading what? Multiple records. I repeat, get entity is for reading single record. Get entity set is for reading what? Multiple records. Just now we understood the purpose of this function model. It is going to read what? List of products. Means it is going to read what? Multiple products. So since it is going to return multiple products, what is the stub I need to implement? Get entity set. So how do we implement here? See, under service implementation, under your entity set, we need to decide the appropriate stub which we need to implement. So this is a stub I want to implement because I want to query multiple records. In this context, multiple products. How do we implement? Right click on that stub, and you'll say what? Map to data source, or you should go to ABAP workbench. Always recommended to go for implementing the business logic manually so that we can implement all the features. Okay, just like if you know WebDim Pro, in WebDim Pro we have wizard based and code based. Wizard based will not what meet all the requirements. So compulsory we have to write the code manually also to implement all the functionalities. Similar here also, as of now, I'm not going for ABAP workbench, but extensively we're discussing this ABAP workbench. We'll focus on what? Writing the code manually, because by using this mapping, I cannot achieve all the functionalities. But since this is a starting stage, I'm not writing any code. I'll just choose what? Map to data source. So I'll right click on my entity set, get entity set. I'll say map to data source. So before I do that, any questions so far? Yeah, is my voice is clear to everyone? Okay. Yeah, Surendra, re-login. Na? I think problem is from your end only. Just re-login. No, no. Why same BAPI, Abhishek? We need to identify the suitable BAPI into sales order. We have to do the mapping with that particular BAPI, not the same BAPI. Here, my requirement is I want to get the list of products. So we have one dedicated BAPI function model for that. I am using that function model. If you want to deal with sales order, header data, or item data, I need to go for some other BAPI. We need to identify that BAPI and we have to do the mapping, not the same BAPI. We have to go for appropriate BAPI. For sales order, you may have different BAPI. For purchase order, you may have different BAPI. For customer master, we may have different BAPI. So we need to decide the appropriate BAPI. Yes, yes. We can also go for custom BAPI. We can do the mapping with either standard BAPI or what? Custom BAPI. Mapping to data source means without writing any code, just we have to do the mapping. ABAP workbench means we need to write the code manually. Manually. Understood. So at this stage, we don't know how to write the code manually. So I'm not going for ABAP workbench. I'm going for a mapping to data source. And mapping to data source, what we will do, we will not write any code. Just we'll do the mapping of the parameters between the source and what target. But what is the issue with this mapping is we cannot achieve all the requirements. So that's the reason always you have to go for what manual coding only. If you are able to do it by using mapping, yes, we can go for mapping. Otherwise, we have to go for what? ABAP workbench. Right. So what I'll do now, I'll right click on this tab. I'll say map to data source. Done. It is asking whether the function model is there in the local system or in the remote system. If it is in the remote system, if it is in the remote SAP system, the basis consultant will create the RFC destination by using what SM59. By using SM59, they will create the RFC destination. We need to choose remote and you have to provide the RFC destination and provide that particular remote function model name. As of now, I am referring to my local function model. Local function model means the function model which is available in the same server. So I'll choose local only. Then it is asking the data source attributes under type. In the drop down, again we have different things. Again we'll discuss all these things. As of now, I want to do the mapping with the BAPI. BAPI nothing but what RFC only. Na? Calling a BAPI nothing but what? It's like a RFC call. So I'll choose the type as what? Remote function call. Remote function call is asking the name. What is the name I want? BAPI underscore EPM underscore product. If you don't know, you have to browse this. But it will show the thousands and lakhs of function models. So better we type it. So what is that? BAPI underscore EPM underscore product underscore what? Get list. So we have to provide the appropriate BAPI. In this context, I want to read the product details. So what is the corresponding BAPI for that? So and so BAPI. Going forward, I'll use some BAPIs related to sales orders. So I'll choose a different BAPI at that time. Okay. BAPI underscore EPM underscore product underscore get list. Continue. Done. So you can see here, I can see what are my properties at my entity set level. Product ID, name and what? Description. Product ID, name and what? Description. Okay. So these entity properties, I need to map it with the corresponding properties of my BAPI function model. So right hand side you can see, okay, this is my BAPI function model. It has got many parameters. One of the parameters is what? Header data, which is an internal table. This brackets indicates what? It's an internal table. If I expand this internal table contains what fields? They are the 18 fields. They are the 18 fields. I'm concerned with only what? Three fields. So what are the three fields here? Product underscore ID, name and what? Description. If I click on propose mapping, what happens? It will map the fields which are having the same name. At my entity level, we have name and description. In my function model level also, we have what? Name. These two fields map, but this is product ID here, this is product underscore ID. Understood? This will not be mapped. Again, you have to map it manually. So otherwise, you can do the mapping one by one. How do you do the mapping? Understood. Right hand side is showing the associated function model. So this is a product ID. Just drag and drop. I'll just choose this product ID. I'll drop it here. Done. It is mapped. Similarly, name. I'll choose the name. I'll drop it here. Okay. I'll choose a description. I'll drop it here. Once again, it got stuck. Right. So what happened here? The three fields of my battery function model are mapped with the corresponding entity properties. So mapping has been what? Done. Right. So once mapping is done, what you have done here, what are the steps I followed here? Implement the business logic. What is the logic I am doing here? Nothing but mapping only. But going forward, we'll write the code manually so that I can implement all the functionalities. All the functionality means what? Order by, group by, select options, parameters, filtering, or aggregation, sorting, everything we can achieve by using what? Code-based implementation. It may not be possible through what? Mapping based. So as of now, I am implementing only one step by doing the mapping. Done. After that, see the arrow pointer here. What you have to do? You have to regenerate the runtime artifact so that they get adjusted. Right after doing the mapping now. So you can see here, mapping has been done. This is my mapping. Let me save it once again. Let me check for the syntax error. Yeah, no errors are found. Let me what? Regenerate the runtime objects. I'll click on this because I've done the mapping. Initially, the runtime objects are generated when there was no mapping. Now, I've done some mapping, means I've done some implementation. I have to regenerate the runtime objects. Yeah, you can see here, they are generated successfully. They are adjusted successfully. Done. So, I'm done with what? Under data model, we have created the entity with properties. Under service implementation, we have implemented appropriate stub. What is the stub I implemented? Get entity set. Why only this stub? Because this is responsible for querying what? Multiple records. I have done the mapping with what? So and so function model. Yeah, Farooq, tell me. Name. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, so this is invalid now. Right, this is invalid. So why like that? I think I dropped description. So I'll just choose this. There's a problem in my mouse. Okay, so it is successfully mapped now. Yeah, thanks for it. So I mapped the product ID with that, name with that, and display with that. It is not giving any errors because all are characters only now. That's why it has done the mapping. So but I'll not get the correct data. That's the reason. Do proper mapping. I'll regenerate the runtime artifacts once again. Right, so they are successfully generated. So we are done up to this part. Any questions so far?
Sir?
Yeah, the
Hello.
Dabashish, tell me.
So if the report having multiple function model, so at that time, how to design OData service?
You have to go for manual coding.
Okay, manual coding.
Yes, in the implementation of that method, we need to call n number of function models and you have to write the appropriate logic.
Thank you.
Okay, right. So where we are done now, we have done up to implementation. Now I need to what? Register my service. Yes, Abhishek. We'll see that. We'll see many examples. We'll come across that sales order also. We'll see the sales orders that is also. Okay, right. How we will do the mapping while using the BAP in the sense? I didn't get your question, Master. How we will do the mapping while using the BAP means the developer should know with what fields we need to do the mapping. See, first of all, I created the entity with how many properties? Three properties. On what basis I have decided? I know that I'm going to do the mapping with what function model? DAPI underscore EPM underscore product underscore get list. I know that what fields I need to consume. What are the fields I need to consume in this particular internal table? There are the three fields: product ID, name, and description. Why these three fields? If you see the overall requirement in my front end application, I have to show how many columns? Three columns only. That's the reason I have created the entity with three properties. So at the time of doing the mapping, I should know where those three fields are there, in which parameter they are there. They are available inside what? Header data. So on that basis, we are going to do the map. Blindly will not create the entity now. We will create the entity based on what? Based on the understanding of your requirement. What is the understanding the requirement? My OData service has to return me what? List of what? Product details. So how do you return the list of product details? There is a dedicated function model for that. BAPI underscore EPM underscore product underscore get underscore. I should know that function model. Understood? So blindly we cannot do it. In that function module, we should know what is the parameter which meets your requirement. In my front-end application, how many fields I want to show? Three fields. Those three fields are part of which parameter? Header data. Okay, so I know that these three fields I'm going to consume. So I understood that they are character. That's why I created the entity with what? Three properties. Three properties with the data type as what? String. And at the time of mapping, I'm identifying the appropriate parameter in my function model, and I'm mapping the what fields of my function model with my entities. Okay, done. So what we have done, we have reached into the runtime after. Now we need to register. So this registration is only one-time job. Okay, we need to register our OData service with the gateway. Okay, if you register the service with the gateway only, I can consume it from what? External resources. Okay, so how do you register now? See here, under service maintenance, make clear, under service maintenance, yeah, these are my system IDs. They are my system IDs. So understood. Here it is showing two things, but generally you'll have only what one ID. So we have to identify the appropriate ID. We will tell this information by the basis consultant. So in my case, the system ID is what EPs, and how it is coming, it is not our job. It is configured by basis consultant. Don't worry about this. We are not bothered about this. Under service maintenance, it will show me the ID of my system. Okay, just right click on that ID. In my context, what is the ID here? EP7. EP7. So I'll right click on this. I'll say what? Register. Why you have to register? If you register your OData service with the gateway client, then only I can consume it. Otherwise we cannot consume without registration. Just like again, if you go back to our ABAP context, we can create the custom BAPI also now. How do you create the custom BAPI? First we'll create the function module by following what? BAPI standards. Then we need to release the function module. If you release the function module only, I can create the what? API method. In SWO1T code, we'll create what? API method. Understood? You have to release the particular function model. Here also, we need to register your service with the gateway. So right click on that, say what? Register. This is only one time job. I'll click on register. Done. You will now be redirected to the selected system. Do you want to continue? Say yes. Done. So to the outside world, your OData service, what is the service name? EPM underscore what? SR. It is automatically proposed. The name is automatically proposed. What is the name of your project? ZEPM. It is suffixed with what? Underscore SR. If you want, you can change. But again, I don't want to disturb the naming convention of the SAP. Okay. So this is the, with this name, your service is exposed. Okay. and where you want to save it in the local object only. I'll click on the local object, done, continue. This is important. What is the service name? ZEPM underscore what? Service. Just click on continue. Done. So your service has been what? Registered. Now we need to maintain your service. How do you maintain? Maintain is what? Testing. Okay. How do you test it? Yeah, Abhishek, tell me what is the doubt? You can unmute and ask also. You do not use. Yeah. We'll see the T codes also. Maintain underscore service. IFWND slash maintain underscore service. Okay, for registration IFWND slash GW underscore client. Since this is the first session, I'm not discussing the T codes. Yes, we can do the same thing. We can run the T codes or directly from here I can right click and do it. Both will open the same thing. We'll discuss the T codes also, Abhishek. Okay. Same thing it will open. The how do you maintain the service means just like how do you maintain your database tables, custom tables, SM30. Here also we have what a T code called as IFWND slash maintain underscore service. Okay. So I'll just right click on this. I'll say what maintain. When I click on maintain, yeah. So this is my service name. This is my service name. Choose your service, it is automatically selected. Click on what? Gateway client. Click on the gateway client. When you click on the gateway client, yeah, okay, so this is the tool where I can test my service. Understood? Before giving that OData service to the front end developers, we need to test it. Okay, so this is the way to test it. How do you test it? Testing is nothing but what? Maintaining. So I repeat this once again. Under service maintenance, right click on the system ID, say what? Maintain, right? The service will be displayed. Choose your service, click on the gateway client tool. When you click on this, you get this particular screen, SAP Network Gateway Client. Done. So first and foremost thing you have to do is before we test your service, I need to collect the information related to my service. My service might contain n number of entities. In this case, I am having only what? One entity. Going forward, I'll create what? Multiple entities. I will link those entities. Okay. And each entity will have what? Properties. Each entity will have at least one key property. Every property will have the data type and size. All this information we need to collect. How do we collect it? Here. This is the URL displayed here. This is the URL which you have to use when you are consuming it from the front end application. So first and foremost thing you have to do is you have to get the information about your service. That is done by using a OData capability, or we call it as query option. Okay, what is that query options here? On the application toolbar, there is a button called as add URI option. If you click on this, it is going to show me different capabilities or different options. One of the options is what? Dollar metadata. Dollar metadata. So just choose the OData capability dollar metadata. So I'm choosing that. So you can see here at the end of my URL, what is my service name? ZEPM underscore service slash dollar metadata. So whether you are a front end developer or back end developer, okay, if you want to maintain your service, if you want to test your service, first you have to collect the information about your service. That is done by using the query option what? Dollar metadata. Okay, so I'll choose dollar metadata. Then here you can see by default what is the HTTP method selected here? Get. We have many methods here. Again, in the next 25 to 1 month, 25 days to 1 month, we'll be discussing all these HTTP methods. As of now, I'm trying to collect the information related to my service. So by default, what is the method selected? Get. This is my service URL. What is the query option I'm using? Dollar metadata. Click on what? Execute button. When I click on execute button, I can see right hand side I got a response here. I got a response. I got the response in green color here. What is that here? Your request is successfully executed. Okay. Yeah, you can see here. This is my entity name. What is the entity name? Product itself. What is my key property name? Product ID. Overall, how many properties are there? Three properties: product ID, name, and description. What is the data type of those properties? String data type. Scroll down. Okay. Okay. And what is the entity set name? Entity set name is your product set. So like this, we need to collect the information about your service. If you are a front-end developer also, we need to collect the information about the service by using a query option called as dollar metadata. So the front-end developer, he may not have access to this tool. Understood? Front-end developer will not have access to this tool. So what he will do? I'm getting the information in the tool. I can open the browser. I can give this URL there. Understood? I can use this URL here. Let me check whether I can show it here. It's a Control C. Okay, so I'm a front-end developer now. What is my job now? I have to consume that particular OData service in my front-end application. So blindly will not consume. We have to get the information about the service. How do we get the information? When the technical specs is given to the front-end developer, they'll give the URL. So you'll give the URL in the browser. You'll use the URL in the browser. Then here, what you'll do at the end here, sorry, at the end you have to use what? Dollar metadata. I'll choose dollar metadata. First of all, as a front-end consultant, we are not bothered about the project name. We should bother about only the service name. Okay? In that URL only the service name will be there. In the URL only your service will be available. You will never get that case first of all. Okay? One second. There's a problem in my settings. Yeah, we'll come back to that. I'll update this later on. This is not my server. Just hold on. Yeah, so you can see here in my tool, if I use a dollar metadata, I got the information about my, yeah, I got the information about my service. Okay, so how to get the information of the service? Dollar metadata. If you are a front-end developer, what you have to do in the browser, will give the URL. In the browser, will give the URL. Okay, this is my URL. At the end of that URL, what you have to do? We have to use a query option. What? Dollar metadata. Okay, here I'm having a problem with my settings. I'll update it later on. Okay, so I got the information. Now, what is my job now? I need to check whether my service is working fine or not. How many steps I implemented? Only one step. Only one step. What is that? Get entity set, I think. That is responsible for returning what? Multiple record. So now I understood that this is my what? One second. One second, please. One second. I'll just copy this URL. In the just give the credentials. Just hold on. Yeah, you can see it. This is my what? dollar metadata which I'm using in the browser. So you can see here, but I got some error here. The problem with the timestamp. One second. Yeah, you can see now. Yeah, is it showing now? Yeah, I use the dollar metadata. You can observe here. Entity type name is product. Same information I got now. Whatever I got it in my tool, whatever I got in my tool, the same thing I got in the browser also. Okay, so the front end developer first always he'll use the query option called as what? Dollar metadata. Okay, so in the technical specs, we'll give the URL. This is my URL, complete URL. So as a front end developer, before I consume, I need to suffix my URL with the query option what? Dollar metadata. It will display the information here. Then it has displayed the information done. Now what I have to do? I have to check whether it's working or not. So let me go back here. Yeah. Here my service contains how many entities? Only one entity now. What is that entity name? Product. So on behalf of this entity, we'll have an entity set now. What is the entity set name? Product set. Okay, so where I can get that entity set information? See this. Here you can see we have a button what? Entity sets. I'll just click on that. It should show me only one entity. Yeah, good. It is showing me what? One entity set. What is that entity set here? Product set. Okay, I'll just choose this. Yeah, this is my entity set, product set. Again, choose the HTTP method what get. So when I execute this, what happens internally is when I execute this, I'm not passing any properties now. I'm not passing any parameters here. So it will execute a stub called as what? Get entity set. It will execute a stub called as get entity set. That stub we have mapped with that BAPI function model now. So that gets executed. See now when I click on execute, I should get the list of products. It may take some time. Yeah, good. I got the data now. I got the data. See the data. Analyze the data here. If you scroll down, yeah, you can see this is my first property. You can see this is one property. What is the product here? UI 1001 name description. This is one record. If you scroll down, I'm getting the rest of the records. Okay, I got the list of what? Products. From where I got this data? At the background, it is invoking that particular function model. With whatever function model I have done the mapping, with whatever function model we have done the mapping, we are getting the data from that only. Okay, I want to get the count of this. Okay, so you can observe here in the same URL, I'll choose add URL option. There is one query option, or we call it as OData capability. What is the dollar count? Earlier I choose what dollar metadata. We have many things, not possible to discuss all these things at a time. Okay, as and when required, we'll be seeing that. So dollar metadata will give the information about your service. Okay, dollar count, what happens? So see the URL now. This is my entity set name. It is suffixed with what capability? Dollar count. So when I execute, it should return me the count of what? It should return me the count of what? Number of records. Let me check. Good. It is returning me what? Count. What is that? 118 records are there. Now your requirement would be I should get the count. Also, I should get the data. I should get the number of records as well I should get the data also. So at that time, what I have to do? I have to write the logic manually. I have to write the logic manually so that I can return the count as well as the data also. Just like if you see select statement, how do you get the number of records written by the select statement? SciDB count now will refer to the system will what? SciDB count. So I should get the count as well as the data. So at that time we'll be writing the code manually. We'll see that going forward. So what are the query options we have seen so far? Dollar metadata and dollar count. Okay. Now once again I'll choose this. I'll just choose my entity set. I'll click on execute. Let it display the data. Yeah, it has displayed the data in this particular format. It has displayed the data in this particular format. Now what I'll do is, okay, I'll choose this. Okay, I'll choose dollar format equal to JSON. Yeah, Madhusudan, already I told you, not possible to discuss all these things at a time. Okay, so as and when required, we'll cover it. I'll choose dollar format equal to JSON. JSON, JavaScript object notation. Execute this. Let's see what happens. Good. You can see here, I got the data. Earlier, I got the data in what? XML format. XML format. Now, I got the data in what? JSON format. JavaScript object notation. So, same data, but the data is displayed in what? JSON format. This is one of the format. JSON format. By default, we are getting in what? XML format. So what is the query option I use here? Dollar format means to change the format of your response. By default, we are getting it in what? XML format. So as of now, we have done only what this thing. Now I'll do one thing. Once again, let me go for, I'll just close this. I'll remove this dollar format. Try to understand. I'll choose dollar metadata. I'll click on execute. Yeah. What is the key property in my entity? What is the key property? Product ID is the key property. Keep this in mind. Product ID is a key property. Now let me choose entity set. I'll choose product set. Execute this. What it is going to do? At the background, it is going to execute a stub called as get entity set. Did we implemented that stub? Yes, we implemented by doing the mapping. So I got what? I got the list of what products. Okay, so let me collect one product manually. Yeah, I got this one. There is a product ID here. What is this? UI-1025. UI-1025. Now what I'll do is, as part of my entity set, in the parentheses, in the brackets, I'll say UI-1025. Try to understand. Okay, this is the request I'm executing now. What I did, this is my entity set name. In the parentheses, I'm supplying the value. This value will be taken for what? Key property. What is the key property in my case? Product ID. Na? So this value will be assigned to what? The key property, which is the product ID. Let me try to execute. See what happens. When I execute, good. I got an error. What is the error I got? 501 it seems. What is the error it is saying here? Not implemented. Because we have implemented only one stub. What is that stub we implemented? Get entity set, which is responsible for returning what? Multiple records. Now when I give like this, it will try to execute what stub at the background? Get entity, which is responsible for reading what? A single record. Since it is not implemented, I got this particular error saying what? Not implemented. So you can see the error here. Yeah, you can see at the background, what is the method is trying to execute? Product set underscore get underscore what? Entity. Not implemented. Not implemented in the data provider what? Class. Method product set underscore get underscore entity. Not implemented. So understanding is, see, let's observe this. Yeah. This is a stub get entity set. At the background, what is the method it will try to call? This is the method. Entity set underscore get underscore what? Entity set. Entity set underscore get underscore entity set. Now we are trying to pass one value. Na? We are trying to pass one value. So what is the stub it will try to execute? Get entity. This stub will internally invoke which method? This is a method. Entity set underscore get underscore entity. What is the error it is showing here? Same one. What is the entity set name in my case? Product set. product set underscore get entity is what not implemented. So tomorrow what we will do is we'll try to implement the other steps. We'll try to implement other steps. As of now, we implemented only what one step. What is that step? Get entity set. This is for reading what multiple record. So just now in the parentheses I gave one value na, that value will be considered for what key property. So whenever we give the URL in that format, it will try to execute which step get entity. This step will internally call which method. This is the method entity set underscore get underscore entity which you are not implemented. That's why we are getting the error. Okay, so rest of the steps I'll discuss tomorrow. So the main focus for today is we have implemented the OData service when URL got generated. How do we maintain that service? First of all, we have to collect the information of the service. How do we collect the information? By using a query option called as $metadata. Okay, whenever we use that query option, it will return me the what? It will return me the what information about your service. What is the entity name? What is the key property? What is the data type? All those things. With that information, we can start maintaining the service. And we have used some query option like what? $count, which will return the count of what? Number of records written. And then we have used another query option called as what? $format to change the format of my response. What is the default format? XML format. I used what? $format equal to JSON. I got the response in what? JSON format. JavaScript object notation. Done. So any questions? Abhishek, what is the doubt? How do we get this information? Huh? Yeah, one is in the tool itself I can get. Otherwise, you have to refer to this site. You have to refer to the site odata.org. odata.org, where you will get all the what list of the query options. odata.org. So I'll go to developers, getting started. Okay, so if you scroll down, yeah, here you can see, you can refer to this. I'll get all the query options. Okay, dollar filter. Okay, this is a standard documentation site for what OData. Dollar expand. Okay, everything. Okay, dollar order by, all these things. Yeah, as I told you yesterday, Abhishek, I'll try to send the recordings on a daily basis, but sometimes no, if I, because this recording conversion, it will take 2 hours time. One recording, okay, it will take what conversion will take around 1.5 hour to 2 hours. Okay, for 1 hour class, it will take 1.5 hour time to convert. And not only this batch, I am having multiple batches, so I need to spend time on the laptop. That's the reason I'll try to share, but sometimes I may miss it. So that's the reason I told that I try to share weekly twice, Wednesday and not Friday. But I'll try my best to share it on a daily basis. But notes, the programs, everything, I'll share it on a daily basis. Yeah, Ragendra, it's possible. Just now, Malsuna has not dollar batch. So by using that query option, we can use a dollar batch. We'll discuss that going forward.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. So just we got the glimpse of the OData service, but our most focus is not on this mapping. We'll always go for code-based implementation so that we can achieve what complex requirement. So maybe in the next 1 or 2 days I'll be discussing mapping, but from next week onwards, the rest of the course will focus on what code-based, so that we will understand how to write the code, where to write the code, and you'll have many parameters to that coding. We'll be using all the things so that we can achieve any kind of requirement. So in the interview point of view also, don't say that we have done the mapping based implementation. Yes, we can do, but in a very limited way. Your resume should highlight what we have written the code manually. So for writing that code manually, we require what object-oriented concepts, strong exposure to object-oriented, like abstract classes, inheritance, constructors, instance methods, static methods, all those things. Right? So we'll just continue tomorrow around same time. So odata.org, the standard site for getting the list of that particular query option, all those things. Abhishek, this is what you're asking or anything else? List of query options, you have to refer to this odata.org. Done. So I'll wind off for today then. We'll continue tomorrow.